Welcome to Grit, everyone, inside Manhattan Beach Studios. I'm Victoria Dennis alongside Meg Burgdorf, and today, AVP Pro and founder of Grow and Flow, Kahlee York.
Hello.
Hey. I already see you all the time.
All the time.
Welcome in.
Good to see you again.
Yeah. How's it going, girl?
You know, just hanging out.
Just hanging out. Just another day at the studio.
Another day at the studio, yeah, casual.
Yeah, casual. Well, we got a little bit of sand splash behind you with your logo going on there.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes.
All right, let's start from the beginning, girl. You played at LSU. Go Tigers, as
Go
you would
Tigers.
say.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Go Tigers.
Yeah. Okay,
With an
sorry.
awesome support community.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, when you go to the NCAA champs at Gulf Shores, like the Tigers are roaring. Their presence was fierce.
Oh yeah. The
Y'all
people
travel
show up.
deep.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Anywhere you go across the country, if I'm wearing anything LSU, like I will get someone to come up to me and start talking to me about the Tigers. So.
Yeah, they it's a religion.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, when you're there, it's like if you've never experienced a football game there, like you need to, because it is like a religious experience.
Did you always want to play for the Tigers?
Oh no, no. When I was getting recruited, Russell was recruiting me, and they were like, okay, like you want to come on your visit? And I was like, I told my parents, I was like, there's no way I'm going to Louisiana. Like there's no way I'm going to go live there. There's no water there. Like, are you kidding me?
You grew up in Florida.
I grew up in Florida. And I went there, and I went to a football game, and I experienced the team and the culture there and just the people there in the community. And I was sold, honestly, from the minute I experienced that campus and the team and everything about it.
Talk about your coaching staff who recruited you, and we always talk about him, but who kind of molded you into the player that you are.
Yeah, so my coaching staff mainly was Russell Brock was our head coach. Katie Leak was our assistant there, and Drew Hamilton was also our assistant there. Fantastic group of people. I ended up staying a year after school and training more specifically with Drew, and he's just a phenomenal coach. And it was truly amazing getting to train under him and learn under him, and then take what he taught me and come out to California and play.
Drew Hamilton took Kristen Nuss and Taryn Cloth to Paris this last year, for those who don't know. And
Studs.
we have an episode with them, and they talk all about Drew. So if you want to see that episode, go ahead and click on it. All episodes are streaming on all platforms, by the way. So you played for Drew, you left LSU, and you found yourself on the beaches of Southern California.
Southern California, I know, right by the water. I knew it. I got to go back, you guys.
The beacon.
I know. Yeah, no, I think like it was amazing training in Louisiana, but ultimately I wanted to be out and in the community to, find a partner, be a part of the world, and really get my feet into like the AVP and getting to be a part of it, truly.
So what's that experience like? So you're coming from not the Mecca to the Mecca, where there's already a pretty thick culture, great people, and it's a buzz and everyone's doing things on their own. What advice would you give to somebody else of making that happen?
Oh my gosh. I think just the willingness, like be bold with it. I think like it needs to be a full send thing. I don't think this is something that you can come out here and just like half do, because it is a really, as amazing as it is, I think it's a really hard thing to be doing. And you're not setting yourself up for a whole lot of success, right? Like it's really hard to break into the main draw. It's really hard to, find a partner, develop those things. Like it's so competitive out here. And in a lot of ways that's amazing, but in a lot of ways that's hard. So I think just like understanding, and when you come out here, especially these girls like transitioning out of college, you come from this like resource, like heavy environment. Like, when you're practicing, who your coach is, you might know who your partner is, like you have so much support and so much structure. And then you're going into a professional world where there's very little structure.
And you're paying for everything.
And you're paying for everything, yeah. And so it's like, how do you make your team? How do you find your resources? How do you make your schedule? How do you know you're progressing? Like, those are all things to start thinking about, I think, before you come out here and you're just kind of like, oh my God, what is happening, you know? So I just think like really think about your structure and what works for you. And it's a cool opportunity because like in school, you're kind of just told what to do. And in a lot of ways that's great, but I think in a lot of ways there's not much freedom to like what works for me And so I think just like learning for the girls coming out of college, like how do you build off of having this structure and then like make it my own, you know, and like not being too intimidating of a thing.
You're no longer a rookie on the AVP. You've been playing for multiple years now, and you've gone through it. You've been in the trenches, and you started Flow to Grow. What is Flow to Grow?
Oh my gosh, Flow to Grow, it really came from my experience. So overall, it's a wellness business for like female athletes or for females in general. And it started because when I was at LSU, again, like I had so many resources, but I also had a lot of health issues. And so I just like wanted to perform so much. Like I just wanted to be the best I possibly could. And that was like what my entire focus was. And I feel like a lot of athletes relate to that. And I just felt like I kept hitting like this wall and then this wall and then this wall. And it was like so frustrating. And I just remember being like, oh my God, I have all these people around me, like there to support me. And I just like have no idea what to do or how to utilize it or anything. And so I experienced some like hard things in college, and then transitioning into the professional world, I got to be around a lot of athletes from other colleges. And I was like, we started talking, and I started talking about what I had experienced, and they're like, oh my God, I experienced the same thing, or this person experienced something like similar but different. And I was just like, wow, like we've all gone through such similar things. And I was just like, I feel like there's something that can be done about this. I feel like there's something that these people could use as support. And so that's kind of what Flow to Grow came from, was just like, I feel like if people started to understand, or information was easier and it was more tangible to understand and apply, that people would be able to transition in and out of college much easier. Because as female athletes, you know, we don't often hear about how we're different as females, because, you know, like our cycles are different and it impacts us. And there's all these things that we're not taught that are part of our sport that aren't the sport itself. And I think that's a really, really important thing to understand, especially when you're transitioning into the professional world. Because, you know, you are trying to create a sustainable environment. It's not this like, oh, I have 4 years, let me just like push myself until I maybe burn out. It's like, no, you have to learn how to last. And so that means creating a lifestyle that helps support that and helps fuel that. And I think that means diving into the things that are not just practice or not just your lift. It's all the other things part of your life.
So for the people looking to learn how to flow and grow at their own rate, what does the first couple of courses look like? And you're building a handbook?
Yeah, kind of.
She is now.
We talk a lot about this.
We talk a lot about this. No, for me, so we're working on a project right now to help people baby step into this process, because it can feel really, really overwhelming. And so we're working on, well, I'm not going to say it now because I'm going to hold off on the project. But
Project X.
Project X, yeah.
It's coming.
Follow us for more.
Yeah. You heard it here first. Yes.
No, but it's really helping people just identify the small things. Like, what's the low-hanging fruit for you? Because a lot of it is just creating like a healthier lifestyle. And it's simpler than you think. And it's just like creating some awareness around like your bodies and what's happening with us and that sort of thing. So.
Can you talk about a few of the different pillars or categories that you might be supporting athletes with, so that, you know, when they're thinking about how I need help, they might not even know there are different categories or resources available?
Yeah, definitely. I think the biggest thing for female athletes specifically, just because it's not talked about often enough, is just understanding your cycle and understanding what's happening with your hormones. Because a lot of people think that our cycle is just our period, and when we have, you know, when we're on our period, but it's actually like around 28 days. And as your hormones are fluctuating, different things are happening in your body, and I like to think of it as like an energy fluctuation. So you have different energy levels, you're focused at different times, your body needs help recovering at different times. And so understanding that is probably a huge part of optimizing like your training schedule, or how you approach practices or how you approach different things. So really starting there of just like, am I tracking my cycle? Am I paying attention to those things?
Do you recommend anything to track a cycle? Or is paper and pen just as good?
Yeah, no, I think I like different apps. So I use Moody, I think is a really great one. You do have to pay an annual fee, but there are free ones as well that are a little bit simpler. But Moody has a lot of like educational things along with it. I've tried out Stardust, which is a kind of a fun one. There's a lot out there. So I would just like really encourage people to kind of like try different things and figure out what works for you.
So walk us through tracking the cycle.
Yeah.
And we talk a lot about hormones. And as you said, as women, it fluctuates more than men.
Yeah.
But men still get, you know, their fair dosage, but your focus is mainly with female athletes?
Yeah, female athletes. So a male's hormone cycle is 24 hours. A woman's hormone cycle is 28 days. And in the first half of your cycle, so people get really confused about, there's so much jargon around all of this, and I think that's where people kind of like check out a little bit. Yeah, I remember when I first started learning about it, I was actually listening to a podcast and they said the word follicular, and I was like, what? And so then I checked out. But I think the basics, like understanding is there's two hormones that kind of run our cycle, and that's estrogen and progesterone. And so understanding and getting familiar with these hormones is really important. So the first half of our cycle, so from the moment you start your period to ovulation, estrogen dominates this first half. So she is like, I call her she. I think it's important. So she's slowly building. So as she's slowly building, so does our energy, so does our focus, our motivation. We might feel more social. It's basically our body is encouraging us to try to get pregnant, pretty much. But obviously a lot of us are not trying to get pregnant right now. But I think as an athlete, it's really important to understand because, you know, increasing energy, increasing focus, increasing motivation, like that's not just for that, you know, that's also really helpful to understand for our practices and like what we're choosing to do for recovery and those sort of things and how much we can handle maybe that week. Then the second half of our cycle is dominated by progesterone. And she is like the let's be zen, let's hang out, like, let's maybe take a nap, let's maybe eat some snacks, you know, like she is the like, basically it's from ovulation to the time we start our next period. And this is the time where our body's like, are we pregnant? Are we not? Like, what's happening here? It's kind of like an assessment period, right? And so the body wants to make sure that our body is not, no harm is coming to it. Right, so it wants to make sure, it makes us more tired because it's like we don't want you out doing things and maybe
like pre-mommy mode. Just in case.
Exactly.
Okay.
And we want all the food because we want the resources, so our metabolism goes up. So that's why you tend to get a little bit more hungry in that phase. So because like the rise and fall of these hormones, different things, like you may need to change different things based on it. Mm-hmm. And for a lot of people who have PMS symptoms or I'd say mainly PMS symptoms, understanding that PMS is not normal. But as athletes, we are a little bit more susceptible to it because basically PMS comes from an imbalance. So as we said, like estrogen starts to rise, right? We get to ovulation and then progesterone starts to rise, right? So they have their time, they have their place. When they're not balanced, so when they're not at their spots where one's supposed to be higher, one's supposed to be lower, one's supposed to come up, like that sort of thing, when they're imbalanced one way or another, that's when we feel symptoms. So that can come from a whole bunch of different places, and that's typically where I start with people, is if you're having those symptoms, if you need a more regular cycle, if you're not having your cycle or you're not having your period as an athlete, because that's really common in female athletes. Kind of starting and looking at your life of like what is going to cause those imbalances.
And what do you find are maybe the top 3 factors in those imbalances?
I would say your stress response. So understanding where stress is coming in your life. So I kind of look at 3 different spots for that. So there's obviously the mind. So there's like the emotional stress, like I just broke up with my boyfriend, or I had this test coming up. You know, it's the typical stress we might think of, right? Then I would say the body's stress. So like if you have an injury, or if you are maybe more stiff, or you're not stretching, you're not doing your mobility, like those sort of like stagnant spots on your body, that can also cause stress in your body. And then I look at nutritional stress, this is, I think, where I find a lot of female athletes lacking a lot. So it's like, are you refueling enough? What does your blood sugar look like, your balance? What does like your post-practice or post-activity like fuel look like? Are you eating enough throughout the day? Are you hydrating? Like those sort of things, because nutritional stress is also a stress response in our body. And I don't think people always associate it with that, especially because like I feel like women are taught like, oh, like train more, eat less. You know, and I feel like we're slowly moving away from that, but I definitely think that was something I heard a lot. And so just getting athletes to understand that, like, you know, you can't just have an energy drink before you go train.
Right.
Because like energy drinks and stuff like that also increase our stress response. So it's like you have this stress response from caffeine, then you go to a practice, which then is your stress response. So then you have these like 2 huge stress responses and our body's freaking out.
And not happy.
Calm down.
We need to calm down. We need some more zen in our lives. But yeah, so I think the stress response is like a really great place for people to look, because ultimately the stress response is survival mode. And so our body is like, anything I don't need to survive in this moment, we're gonna shut off. So that means your reproductive system, means your digestive system, all those things get shut off when you're in a stress response. And stress isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just like, as athletes, we have it so much because, you know, our lifts, our practices are worked into our days, into our weeks. And it's hard to refuel and get all that nutrients back. So just kind of understand that we're a little bit more susceptible as female athletes to this like stress response. So you have to be a little bit more proactive to get out of it.
How do you become proactive if you're 13, 14, 15?
Yeah.
Right? A lot of changes happening.
So many changes.
But these are how old your clients are, right?
Yeah.
So how do you become proactive?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, I normally like to start with the nutrition and just making sure like, okay, let's habit stack. Brooke Wyatt is awesome with this. I've talked to her a lot and she's helped out, but she talks about like a nutritional timeline. And I feel like it can be really intimidating to think about like, am I eating correctly all the time? But I love the idea of like, because this is how I kind of approach it too. It's like, okay, I have a practice. Like I either ate within a certain amount of time a meal, or I need a snack beforehand if I didn't. And then within an hour after my practice, I need to be eating proteins and carbs, you know? So I think it's kind of like learning how to stack things together. It's like I already have this concrete thing in my life. How do I now pair things to it? So I think that's a really great thing to do. I also love like, you know, there's little things like feet up the wall, or there's like reset activities that can kind of help your body get out of that stress response that you can do for like 5 minutes following a lift or following practice or at night right before you go to bed. So it's not these like ginormous changes. It's just like finding like little habits that you can pair with like your nighttime routine or with your practice or with your lift.
What's the nighttime routine? It's feet on the wall. I'm taking notes.
I know
Your girl
we're
be traveling a little bit for work, so my sleep like gets thrown off. Like not to like make it about me right now, but like when you travel and you feel like those stresses from like work or from playing, what are those like feet on the wall? What are the other ones?
Feet on the wall is my absolute favorite. I think in my brain, it's like, I just need 15 minutes with just my brain. Like, just me and my brain need to like hang out for 15 minutes. So just like no stimulation. So taking time to do that, whether you call that meditation, whether you just lay on the floor, you know, because I love floor time. It's actually funny. I remember in college, all of us would talk about, we'd get home from practice or like lift or something, you know, you're dirty and you don't want to shower yet, so you just lay on the floor. And I was like, that was our body trying to regulate right there.
Yes, for sure.
There's one where you can lay on the floor and you move your feet up and down. I just learned this one. It's like a rocking motion. So that one can help. Let's see. Oh, there's one I learned recently. I went and worked with Beth Dreyer, who also is phenomenal. And she was working on my leg, and she had me lay on this ball. It was like a soft ball on my stomach, and it was just laying right here and just breathe for a few minutes. And what she taught me was like, that was like my body being like, okay, your heart and lungs and everything are okay from the tactile. and then the breathing was helping my body regulate. And then she's like, okay, now we can go look at the pain points.
Wow. So a nice reset technique.
Yeah. So she's been really awesome teaching me some of those too. But
I only advise if you are putting your feet on the wall, make sure you wash them first from the sand, because I think I've ruined a few hotel room walls with heel prints. Like, probably not a good idea.
Definitely.
It's so interesting, and again, we talk about this all the time, but how like modern medicine really pushes chemicals on you, and I'm all for like modern medicine has done awesome stuff that we couldn't do 100 years ago. But it's really interesting to study the herbs and spices of Eastern medicine.
Yeah.
And we've touched on that a bit. And it's really coming down, a lot of it is diet.
Yeah.
So what
Or lack of things in diet. I feel like we're on a new trend back to that.
For sure, definitely.
Absolutely.
What are some common things that you've found for females specifically going through their hormonal 28 days? What maybe herbs or spices or just straight up food is good?
Yeah. I mean, I think the general like sticking to a whole foods diet, you know what I mean? Like the less processed, the better, the less sugar, the better. But I also think like the stress of being perfect also causes a stress response, you know? So it's like this like line you're towing of like, okay, let's like work to have more whole foods and have really balanced blood sugar and have balanced meals and that sort of thing. But also like, let's not stress out over having
be easy on yourself.
Yeah, be easy on yourself.
Life is already hard enough. Like you don't have to add another like stressor on top of it to like try and be like perfect. Like Kahlee said, flow and grow, eat whole foods. Right. But like be gentle and kind to yourself, like how you would to others. And I think like people really have to, you know, think about that sometimes.
Yeah. And I think athletes too, like it's this idea of like, okay, I need to be good with my diet. I have to be perfect, you know? And it's like
the internal competitor takes
they're
over.
They're super competitive. Yeah, exactly. And I think too, like we look to other people and it's like, what are they doing? Like, how are they eating? And, you know, there's foundational things that obviously athletes and people in general should be doing. But I think it's just really finding what works for you. You know what I mean? What do you like after practice? What makes you feel good before practice? You know, it's like, it's kind of taking the time to play around with those things.
And realizing that genetics are different for everybody, even in between siblings in the same household. And you cannot compare yourself to your sibling, to your teammate, because your genetic model makeup is unique. And there's nobody else that has the exact same chemicals in your blood and in your DNA. And that's so important to preach because you can't compare.
And I think that's the really beautiful thing about like your cycle and like what it's kind of teaching us. And like some people, it's kind of become popular on social media, but like the whole cycle syncing thing, which I don't personally teach fully. But I think it's a really beautiful cycle because it's like, okay, like we're not the same every single day. Like quite literally, that's why I'm trying to teach girls. It's like you can't do the same thing every single day because your body's not biologically the same every single day. And so it's like you have to take this like ownership of your body of like, okay, I wake up in the morning, how do I feel? What do I need? And that's what Flow to Grow is really trying to be is like, okay, how do we create this awareness? But also, you know, some people have the awareness, but they don't have the tools to like, okay, I feel this, I know I need this, but like, how do I get there, right? And so that's what Flow to Grow is really trying to be, is like, what are these resources that you can have and how do I apply them in my life?
And that's amazing because I think right now a lot of the girls go to social media. And I know COVID brought up a lot of engagement with maybe inappropriate techniques for elite athletes versus maybe an older woman, a younger woman, somebody who doesn't work out and burn the calories the same way, and they become, you know, trends and fads. So what do you have to say about using social media in the right way?
I definitely think you have to be careful. And I'm trying to be really cognizant as I'm building my social media. And it's been really amazing. I've kind of created a team, you know, because I'm not trained in nutrition. I know my basis in those things, but bringing in someone like Brooke Wyatt to help me and talk to me about it and have like someone being able to push her to it, or Beth Dreyer on the movement side, or I've had Dr. J, you guys had him on here as well for the mind side. And it's been really fun getting to collaborate with them and talk to them about that. It's like, okay, what is out there and what are people following, and how do we kind of like revert them back, and just like having those conversations. But I think like just the whole fact-checking thing, like seriously, just I really want to push people towards like social medias that I know are good and I know are like run by people who know what they're talking about and that sort of thing. And I think the biggest thing with like kids and actually everyone really is like, you can't just pay attention to the one that like you like, like because it's probably supporting something that is like maybe a bad, you know what I'm saying? Like
it's feeding the inner devil, dare we say.
Exactly. So I think just being aware of it, and I think it's great that people are wanting to put information out there, but I do think it is scary how much access to information there is. So yeah.
By following Flow to Grow, what can I expect to see on your website and social media?
Oh my gosh. Lots of information about women's health. And women's health is something that like I think people are still really uncomfortable talking about.
Right.
And I just want it to be a place where it's like, hey, we're comfortable talking about these things, and like let's do it. Like let's have these conversations. Like I want to know what people want to know about, and I want to educate people because it can feel, like I said, very overwhelming to hear the jargon. And then I also want it to be a place where like you can tangibly apply things, because I think there's a lot of information now starting to come out. I don't think there's a lot of guidance as to how to apply it to yourself.
Well, and I think that's very true because there's a lot of information emerging about perimenopause, menopausal, and our elite athletes are getting older and having, scientifically, we've extended their athletic performance years. Yeah. And now we're tapping into something that could start changing in their mid-30s once again.
Absolutely, absolutely. So a lot of information surrounding that. And then I'm also starting to incorporate a little bit more from like nutritionists, psychologists, movement specialists, trying to show how all these things work together. Because as an athlete, like all these things are cohesive. And, it's like, if I have no energy, like I can look to my nutrition, or I can look to maybe my mind, or I can look to my cycle. Like there's all these questions and all these things that play into how I come out and how I perform as an athlete. So teaching people a little bit more about how that's all impacted.
Through conversations with Flow to Grow, with different people, different clients, what are the top 2 questions that always get thrown at you?
Oh my gosh, what about birth control? Birth control is always the first thing that people ask about. Let's see, what else?
And what do you tell them?
What do I tell them about birth control?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I say that I lean towards a more naturalistic route, but I don't think it's a bad thing. So I'm not against birth control. However, I do think it's scary how it's being applied and how much it's being just taken without any sort of education. So I would say the biggest thing is like there's typically like 2 reasons that you get put on birth control, and there's obviously so many other factors, but the 2 main ones is either like, okay, I don't want to get pregnant, which fair. But there's also other methods, and I don't think a lot of women understand that. There's a bunch of methods to track when you're ovulating, because that's how you know when you can get pregnant and whatnot. So if you don't want to be on birth control just because you don't want to get pregnant, like there are things you can do and you can keep track of if that's something that you don't want to do. So I think just understanding that side of it. On the other side of it, people get it for like PMS symptoms. So it's like, okay, I'm a kid, I have hormonal acne, or I have headaches, or I have really debilitating cramps during my period, like those sort of things. And I think it can be a little scary that birth control is just being applied to like fix that, because it's more of a Band-Aid than anything. Because what birth control is it's synthetic hormones. So you know how I was talking about how estrogen and then progesterone kind of flow through your cycle and regulate? So they just put synthetic hormones at those times. So the reason that like your acne and that stuff goes away is because your body's receiving the synthetic hormones at the correct times. But what you don't understand is why are your hormones not regulating normally? So like I said, like what stress is happening in your body that's causing those things. So we don't end up addressing that. So we don't understand where is the source of this imbalance. And I think that can get really tricky. Because if you ever want to come off of birth control, it's going to come back because you never fixed it. Or it can cause other issues. And I actually had a friend of mine, when she was a kid, she had these migraines. And she was prescribed birth control for it. And I don't remember the timeline and everything, but she ended up talking to one of her friends and was telling her about her symptoms. And her friend was like, I think this is this other disease. Like, I think I've heard of this. I think I knew someone about this. And so she went to another doctor and she was like, hey, like someone just suggested this. I was just wondering if I could maybe get this like checked out. Turns out she had that other disease. And so while she was being prescribed birth control, this other disease was still in her body and not being treated. And she's like, I could have gotten blind. And obviously people are not that dramatic and that intense. Like it can be smaller things, but I think that's a really big thing is like, this shouldn't be a Band-Aid thing. I don't think it's a bad thing, but I just think people should know that there's other options out there for it.
And you talked a little bit of watching sugar intake and monitoring glucose. Now they're kind of releasing the technology for continuous glucose monitors that diabetics had, but now for elite performance and managing that. Do you have any perspective on the nutritional insights or data maybe that it provides?
Honestly, not too much. I do know like blood sugar spikes. So like for people who don't really know what that is, like blood sugar is kind of coming from like sugars or carbs. So Glucose Goddess is someone that it was the first person that I ever ran into or like on social media that I was like, she's really interesting. She actually includes a lot of research with her posts, which I really loved. That was the first time I ever heard about blood sugar. And then when I started studying hormones and cycles, I really saw how our blood sugar could be more sensitive at different times in our cycle, and how important it was to just be aware of it. So I haven't looked too much into like the actual tracking in the glucose monitors for athletes.
I think it's kind of just breaking as we speak. You know, that technology is becoming more advanced. Well, it's crossing, it's crossing the industries. It was used for people with diabetics to manage and be aware. But now we're seeing the benefits for all of us in understanding how our body processes.
Well, I think that's kind of the point that I'm trying to make with Flow to Grow is like, okay, you look at this medical device that's being used for people to like optimize their body. Okay, now we're using it with athletes to try to optimize your body.
Performance,
And I think that's the entire idea around your cycle and around women's health is like, we are not taught to optimize our body because we're not taught about our body. So it's like, people get so uncomfortable about this and about talking about people's periods and this and that and whatever. And it's like, no, this is a tool. Like this is an understanding of this person's body so that they can perform at their best. And I think when you switch that mindset, it becomes a whole nother conversation.
What's the second question?
Oh, I know.
I was like, is she coming back?
Is there something else? I mean, I think people always want to know where to start. And I think we covered it a little bit, but I think just like getting away from this idea that it's this like daunting, huge thing that you have to change in your life. And I think, personally getting away from like the whole like cycle syncing. So, as athletes, like you can't really follow that to a T because like you don't know when you're going to have to perform and you have to train a bunch. So I think for people just like understanding the best place to start, one is just becoming aware. So just starting to track your cycle and your body. And then understanding like what might cause some extra stress in your body and just starting to get to know like what does my daily activity look like how do I feel day to day based on the things I do, and just like start to kind of create this timeline and understand like, okay, I feel good when this happens and I feel bad when this happens, and okay, maybe that's different the next week. And so I think just kind of creating some more awareness around it.
You're aiming to have some Flow to Grow workshops maybe?
Yeah. We're wanting to do some webinars, kind of leading up to this new project that we're doing.
Project X.
Project
Stay
X.
tuned.
Stay tuned. But yeah, to just, I'm really working on it to kind of create that cohesive environment for athletes. Because when talking to these other professionals, like Beth and Dr. J and Brooke, and we keep coming back to this idea of like, it keeps coming down to like understanding your body and the language of the body, right? And what is my body telling me? And I think that's such a, not a fad, but like a, what am I trying to get at? Like people hear that term a lot, listen to your body.
But what does it
What the hell does that mean? What does it mean, listen to my body? Like, my knee gonna tell me I don't know, like I can't speak. So I think just kind of creating some more conversation and language for people to be like, okay, I feel these things. Because, like we tend to feel things like we're tired or we're exhausted, and maybe we don't know that that's not how we're supposed to be feeling. Or I feel this, or maybe like I feel anxiety, but I didn't even realize I was feeling anxiety. Right. And so creating some language for that of like, okay, like I feel these things, like now what do I do? How do I think? So that's what these webinars are hopefully going to help them do is like, okay, I feel this. Now where do I go from there?
Love that. I have one more burning question.
Oh gosh.
What advice would you have to any male coach on any age, let's say junior, collegiate, into the pro, on talking about this, on providing information, encouraging, having openness, any of those things? What advice would you give to male coaches?
Yeah, I've been asked this actually quite often. I would say my biggest piece of advice is you're the leader. So if you make it awkward, it's going to be awkward. If you don't make it awkward, it's not going to be awkward. And I think that's what a lot of them don't fully understand, is like if you feel awkward, you're projecting that then onto your team. And I think the more you talk about it and the more comfortable they hear about it from you and the frequency of it, I think then it becomes normalized. And so I think just for them starting to educate themselves, and again, it doesn't have to be about are you on your period or not. I think that's just where we get stuck so often. Yeah, I'm like, okay, I understand how that can be uncomfortable, for now. But I think kind of getting back to what I was saying of like talking to them as if this is an energy cycle. Okay, this is how my energy is fluctuating. This like has something to do with my performance, and this is a tool to understand my body to perform. And so I think, again, once you make that mindset flip, and so for them just educating themselves and how that works, and just kind of starting there.
And maybe just asking like, oh, how are you doing today?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be like direct, like.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it can be uncomfortable, especially like for women, like some women are uncomfortable talking about it. Like now, like men having to talk about it, like I just don't, it's not natural, right? And especially like you're 18 and your coach is like a 55-year-old man. It's like, I'm not going to talk to you about this. Like what?
Yeah.
So maybe bringing in resources.
Yeah.
And then just like different waves of coaches, like a middle-aged man being like, how's your energy today?
Yeah.
Like on a scale of 1 to 10.
Are you chill or energetic?
Are you chill or energetic? We'll get a lot of information from you.
Yeah. On a 1 to 10 scale, like at least like checking in like that way. Like obviously you don't need to have this conversation with a middle-aged man that is your coach, but maybe providing the resources for your athletes that like Flow to Grow.
Yeah, like Flow to Grow.
For your athletes.
Yeah.
Bring in Flow to Grow.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think, again, like you said, it just starts with them being educated about it and understanding it and like, bringing awareness to other aspects of the cycle than just, are you bleeding or not?
Because it's mind, body, and nutrition as well. So it's not just one aspect of it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's all the things you might talk about anyways. Like you talk about energy, you talk about recovery, you talk about nutrition. Well, I guess hopefully you talk about all these things. But people talk about that in terms of performance. So you can still talk about those things and just like understand how it might fluctuate during a cycle. So.
Well, thanks.
Yeah,
thank you.
Of course.
Anything else off the top of your mind that we haven't hit on?
Oh my gosh, anything else?
What about the AVP?
Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
That little thing over there. What about the AVP?
Did you enjoy watching the league?
I did. I wasn't able to get out to any of them except for Saturday of the championships.
I saw you there.
Yeah, I did see
You were like,
we were there.
She rose in front of me. I was like, hey.
It's like, oh, hey, how long you been there? No, I had a really good time, honestly. I mean, I think it is like a huge adjustment. And like the 15 is like a little weird, you know. I think it's a cool dynamic with like the male and female aspect of it. But it was really entertaining, and I had a really great time, and it was really great seeing like friends out there competing, and obviously Gina and Tony doing so well, and just like crushing it out there. So it was fun to get to see that.
Yeah. Where do you see the AVP League expanding to? What's your like ideal, if you had to paint a picture of what it looked like?
What it looked like. I mean, I still think it'd be really cool to like simulate the college format.
Yeah, that's what we've all been saying.
I picked 3 pairs. I think 3 is great, and you can have, you know, alternates, maybe a 4th or 5th on the roster if somebody travels for an international or whatever.
Yeah, and then instead of like 4 teams competing at one weekend, it'd be like 2 teams competing one weekend.
Yeah, but then you'd have to have the tie break.
Right.
Which I guess they do just have 2 teams per. Interesting, actually. I don't know. But yeah, I think everyone's kind of looking for that team camaraderie.
Because if you brought in the Tiger fans to a beach volleyball stadium on the pro side, I think
they would show up.
Fun. New Orleans should have a team.
New Orleans should have a team.
Okay,
Yeah,
you heard it here first.
Heard it. We get 10%.
I know, New Orleans would be really fun. But yeah, I think it's cool. I'm excited to see it.
Yeah, it's fun. We'll see like where it expands to and everything. And Gina was on just the other week, and she said how like her team would get together. She reached out to the guys and were like, let's get lunch and like just hang out. And then they watched film together and they ran practices together and really like built that team chemistry.
That's what we've all been missing though.
Yeah.
Like that's what like
The team and
especially this like the girls coming from college. I guess some of the guys played indoor or other sports, but yeah, that team camaraderie feel. Like I think we've all just been like really missing that and wanting that. So I do think that is a really fun aspect of it. But you could feel it even more with 3 teams.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's like you want to build each other up, you know, and I think it's fun in that way.
Big time.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Yay. Flow to grow. I love it.
Flow to grow.
Yes.
Gotta flow.
Gotta flow to grow. It's easy. It's an easy. Yeah.
Just like that.
And where can they follow you?
Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram right now. So finding_flow to grow, because flow to grow was taken. Rude. Yeah, but please like message me any questions anyone have. I'll be in my DMs. And I really just want to spread the awareness and just support all the women out there. So yeah. Deal.
Thanks guys for tuning in here inside Manhattan Beach Studios. Make sure to follow Flow to Grow on all social platforms and keep it gritty out there.